Good morning, gents. Morning. Thank you all for being here, first of all. And these guys have just come fresh from watching your film. Damien, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. Congratulations, first of all, on an incredible story. And a story that, if I'm right, is kind of your story. How much of it is your story?
Too much. I think. I mean, I was a jazz drummer in a sort of competitive ensemble. In my case, it was high school, but it was sort of a special kind of high school program that was modeled after sort of conservatory programs, and with a very sort of tough teacher and a very kind of cutthroat sort of atmosphere. So I just remember, I guess to me, if the movie was about anything, it was about the sort of fear that you feel as a musician in that circumstance, and how antithetical that seems to art. You know, that you think of art, and especially jazz, as something that should be freeing and liberating, and something where you're kind of communicating emotionally with people. And then it turns into it, but at the level of education, at the level of sort of raw honing of technique, before you can access, sort of before you can be able to improvise, before you can be able to do a lot of the things that we more normally associate with jazz, there is this element of utter rigor and utter discipline and almost military hardship that I just don't think we kind of know enough about or see enough about in movies about musicians. I think there's this idea that you kind of roll out of bed and and suddenly you're kind of improvising great solos, and I don't think we see enough movies about practice. So that sort of aspect of it, and the sort of fear that comes from not mastering that kind of technique is what I kind of wanted to hone in on.
You mentioned the word fear there, and the gentleman sat next to you injects fear quite brilliantly. Congratulations. I mean, Fletcher, what a character. What do you think drives him? What's his drive?
Passion and for the music, and utter perfectionism, and complete single-mindedness of pursuit of that goal. Human collateral damage notwithstanding.
In terms of kind of preparing for the role, what did that involve for you? Did you kind of seek out, those types of individuals who are driven by that perfection in a teaching stance, or?
Honestly, the preparation that I had to do for the role was just learning the music. As far as playing the character, it was all there on the page, and I didn't feel the need to look outside of what Damien had written and what was in me to pull it off the page for any kind of inspiration, and then just sort of hit the deck running with this guy, and we
Miles.
Oh yeah.
It's okay. Yeah.
And we did our thing.
And Miles, you drummed from the age of 15 as well, which stood you in good stead, but you had to learn a whole other discipline for this.
Yeah, I played drums since I was like 15. And my family both me and my older sisters, we all kind of played instruments. I started with piano, and then I actually played saxophone in jazz band in middle school and high school. That was kind of any knowledge I had of jazz music was just playing alto saxophone, and I only played that up until sophomore year, and then I started playing baseball, other stuff. But yeah, with drumming, I drummed in some rock bands. I just asked for a drum kit when I was like 15. My parents were kind enough to buy me one, and I just started playing with my buddies who played guitar kind of, and we covered like Green Day and stuff like that, and but I've always taken my drum kit with me, but I'd never taken any kind of lessons for it, so it was a whole, it was great. When I was first starting to get these lessons, it was one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, that's so much easier to do it that way. I've been doing it this other way. It's that's wrong, and so I just started taking jazz lessons like 4 hours a day, 3 days a week, with Damien kind of at first, and then the kid who plays Carl in the film is this guy Nathan Lang, and he's a very good drummer, and so he was kind of my teacher, and just teaching me the traditional kind of jazz playing, and how to hold the stick, and it was very basic at first, literally like, this is how you hold the stick, and this is how you hit the snare drum.
Starting again.
And even that is like just this motion right here, Damien would have me practicing this just for hours on
You
my
doing that,
thigh.
and then JK doing that. It's kind of like this.
Boom.
Ooh, that's the Ooh, fear of God shoots through me when he does that. And am I right in thinking as well that with the practice scenes that you were filming, that Damien wouldn't shout cut on it? He would kind of almost keep you going until you kind of reach that point of exhaustion.
Yeah, I guess that's a question for Damien. Really? Yeah.
Makes me sound so tyrannical. No, I think that's just one scene that we're talking about. Miles likes to give me grief for. It is true though. I mean, we shot the movie so quickly that when you kind of, you know, I mean, when you look at Miles on screen, it's you know, he's not sort of acting exhausted. I mean, there's real sort of exhaustion that you know, maybe was the one weird benefit of having such a kind of such a tight schedule and such an unrealistic schedule in a way.
Time to get this out there. 19 days for the whole shoot.
Wow. Did that help? Sorry, I will get to your questions in just 1 second. Did that help? Do you think that kind of added something to the intensity of the film?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only way it maybe helped was, again, with that kind of emotionality. That said, I think, you know, you can always use more time, and certainly Miles and JK are both good enough actors that they don't need to not sleep to act sleepy, you know, so it's
to future directors out there, that's not true.
Right, let's get out to your questions then, shall we?
When Jason Reitman was here last week, he said that he wishes he'd been the one to direct you through this performance. But I was wondering if you could maybe just speak a little bit about the sort of remarkable run of roles you've had in the last few years and the way your career is really, I don't want to say late blossom, but it has, like, it's been a remarkable few years for you, hasn't it?
It's been great, yeah. And Jason expressed that to me early on, a similar sentiment about, you know, loving what Damien had written and loving the work that Damien was doing. And Jason, of course, is a producer on the film. Jason and Helen. Hello, Helen. As well as, you know, men, women, and children. Yeah, it's been, I mean, being involved in, you know, to one degree or another in every film that Jason has done from every feature from the beginning has been a really fun and gratifying part of my career. And the fact that this script came to me from him was my first clue that it was going to be something that had a chance to be extraordinary.
Thank you. A lady here?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You touched upon improvisation already, being at the heart of jazz, and I just wondered, was that the spirit of that able to translate on set? Were you able to be more instinctive with your performances and allow things to happen in the moment, really?
I don't have a response written for that question, so I don't feel that I'm able to respond.
Actors are monkeys. Just give them direction.
Direct quote. Like that.
Just giving you gold. No, I mean, well, I'll let the actors speak. Certainly, it was important to me to. I mean, I'd actually, the first things I had done kind of in school and stuff like that were actually documentaries and then sort of semi-documentaries and a lot of kind of verite shooting of jazz musicians. And so this was actually the first time I'd done something that was as kind of carefully written out and storyboarded and everything. But that said, it's still, my philosophy is still that, you know, if you're literally only going to transpose the sort of script and storyboards, you might as well just publish the script and storyboards and, you know, not have the pain of working with actors. The whole point of wonderful performances or having wonderful actors is to actually give them some room to play. So that was certainly my philosophy. So certainly, you know, I wouldn't say it was a completely improvisatory set, partly also because there wasn't time for that. But when you have people as good as Miles and JK, you want to let them riff. And certainly some of my favorite little moments in the movie, whether it's little lines or even just looks, are JK and Miles. I mean, one example is which I just was remembering was when JK. One of the first times we see JK, he comes into the Nassau band room and opens up the folder and kind of does this little look at the music that they're playing, which I guess is not quite up to his standards, and says cute. and I didn't write that, and that's an example of something that to me says pages and pages about the character in a way that I could have written 5 pages of dialogue to equal that, and it wouldn't have been as good.
Yeah, it was cool to have something that was so thorough on the page, but also to have the freedom to play within that framework, and that's part of what what's fun about what we do. But oftentimes on a movie you'll have one or the other. You'll have like a really good solid script, or you'll have this sort of we put this down, but just do what you want, kind of thing. So this was a nice combination.
Lady in the front here, and then we'll come up to the back.
The film, in one sense, is all about mentors, and I wonder, each of you, have you ever had a mentor that sort of meant as much to you as these characters do to each other?
I'll go for. Certainly the kind of the relationship I had with my band, my band leader, my band teacher, was certainly the main inspiration for the character Fletcher and for this entire kind of movie. It made me a better drummer. I don't know if it made, certainly I'm not a drummer now, so I can't say it made me a great, artist as a drummer. But in terms of just sheer work ethic, certainly it made me think about, and we've talked about this a little bit, about the extent to which fear can be a motivator and whether that's a good or a bad thing. If you assume that it works sometimes, which I think sometimes it does, a lot of times it just discourages people, sometimes it does, then in those few cases, is it worth that kind of, that kind of torment?
Most mentors that I think back on were much kinder and gentler. And really, the people who, in my experience, who used fear as a motivation, I just don't respond well to that, and so I don't.
Miles?
I kind of echo, stuff that J.K. said in terms of responding to it. I had a piano teacher when I was young who was like pretty tough on me, but I didn't have the passion for piano, so I just quit taking lessons from her. And then I had the closest thing I have to Fletcher was a driver's ed teacher I had that was just so out of left field. The guy used to get so pissed off, like, if you could not parallel park, and literally would like slam stuff and would really strike fear in his students. And it was just such a bizarre like displacement of that kind of like energy. And so, but yeah, I never had it with like acting.
Yeah. A dangerous environment as well to lose it.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to go up to the back. Gentleman at the back up there.
Yes, hello. Damien, I've just made a documentary about James Brown, so you probably know a little bit about him as well, and the fear he struck into people, so I was laughing as well. Yeah. I actually have a question. I was reminded... I just want to sell my documentary. I came to think of boxing films, and I think, has this been an inspiration for you whilst filming? I know it's in the camera as well, but was this in any way a parallel?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it started with just the idea of showing the physicality of music playing. I think especially in today's day and age of a lot of electronic music, a lot of music that's sort of not made physically per se. The idea of physical musicianship and what that does to the body, I think, is interesting and sort of underappreciated. The way that trumpeters screw up their lips and pianists screw up their fingers and drummers kind of screw up their hands and sometimes their full arms, and so that immediately kind of brings you more into the realm of sports. So I guess I wanted to sort of draw some of those parallels again, also because I think there's lots of music movies about the more intellectual or emotional sides of the art form, which obviously are just as crucial, but I don't think needed to be spotlighted as much. I think there's more need today to spotlight the sheer physicality and sheer kind of just sort of raw hard work that goes into even getting to that level and what that does to your body. And I just remember, I remember my hands bleeding a lot, and so a lot of the imagery just came from my own just my own personal experiences, and also the rage you feel sometimes as a musician trying to get something right. In a way, it mirrors Fletcher's rage at his musicians. Andrew gets just as angry as Fletcher ever does, at himself when he's not getting something properly in his practice room, and that's a sort of feeling that I think a lot of musicians can share, that sort of feeling of butting your head against a wall and it's not giving in, and you can't do whatever you're setting out to do. So I think there's a kind of anger and a physicality that comes from that to me is not that far from, the stuff you see in Raging Bull.
Damien actually gave me a copy of Raging Bull to watch as kind of a preparation for this. So it's a little
how much pain he was going to put you through.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, a little DVD commentary note right there.
Yeah.
A little known fact.
Mine's got the microphone there.
A question for Miles. Can you tell us a little bit about the logistics, of doing the final scene? How long did that take? Yeah. Was it real blood? And as someone who personally can't play a single instrument, how much of that do you make up as you go along? Or is there music for a drum solo?
Yeah, it's all kind of blurry because we did film it in 19 days. I think we spent 2 days on that last performance. And, one day we did like 140 setups, so it was just kind of like, just a ton. But yeah, Damien pretty much, would tell me to play a 10-minute drum solo. And I also had the music for the drum solo, before we started, and it was something that I was listening to. And absolutely, there were parts of it, as there were with Whiplash and Caravan, that I tried to know by heart. And whether it's something on the hi-hat or, Damien liked when I'd be going back across the cymbals, so he'd say, okay, yeah, let's do it again, but, do that kind of back and forth thing. I really like it when you're moving around the kit like this, we'd kind of do that. But yeah, for a lot of it's just kind of like you're playing a 10-minute drum solo and people have to listen to it. And that's great because I played drums in my house and my parents never really told me to quiet down and stuff, but nobody wants to hear a 10-minute drum solo. But in this, it's the climax of the movie. Not mine. No.
It was a vat of Damien's that he'd saved up from his college.
That should become the official answer. Yeah.
Really enjoyed the film. My question is for Miles and JK. Miles, you were speaking earlier about being taught the drums and practicing the drums for this role. In the previous films that you guys have made, what other skills have you picked up, if any?
New skills through work.
I don't know.
None?
I'm playing a boxer. I guess for this movie it was kind of the first thing that I really honed in on a skill because that was such a pivotal part of a performance. I guess other skills I've shown is not getting in shape. I've done a pretty good job of avoiding the six-pack cliche young actors are thrown into, so did a good job with that.
Until now,
yeah. So for this boxing movie, I started a boxing movie in like 3 weeks, and that's kind of something that I've been, amidst all this traveling and promoting Whiplash, I've been able to get into a gym and do some of that stuff, and I find that to be, it's great anytime you can kind of parallel a skill that your character's doing. I just think it makes it even more, more rewarding, at least for me.
JK?
Yeah, I haven't had a lot in the way of specific physical training for things, stunts and fighting and stuff like that early on and doing dialects or accents. But in terms of learning real physical skills, I haven't... I'm sure, somebody will say, will point out 3 things that I did 19 years ago that I've totally forgotten about, but nothing's coming to mind.
Lady down the front.
I want to ask JK about projecting fear and how you went about making him so terrifying, and if you stayed in character in between, and what you do.
I terrorized the entire crew, the entire 19 days. Crafty hated me. Well, he was scared of me, David. No, we quickly fell into a rhythm of just having fun, goofing around on the set. Actually, in between takes, Damien would yell cut, and this kid would try to amp up the testosterone.
Yeah, right. It's okay. It's just
right
there.
Oh, good. Thank you. That's good. he would, he would reassert his masculinity, which I had stripped him of during the previous take. Or he would attempt to. So yeah, no, it was pretty light. And as far as creating the character, I felt like I was just channeling what Damien wrote, and there was no conscious effort on my part to achieve anything other than bringing his work off the page.
And we've got a gentleman over here with a question.
Mr. Chazelle, congratulations, and all of you, congratulations on a great film and a phenomenal run. Mr. Chazelle, you sort of touched on this subject already, but I'd like to come back to it. This arc of talent and hardship and triumph is sort of like the arc that we see on biopic films, and this being a semi-autobiographical film, I was wondering if there were like elements of biopic films that you tried to avoid or stick to. And speaking of biopic films are usually what we call Oscar bait. And I would like to ask you, how accurate would you think the title of Whiplash Whips Up Oscar Nods is going to be?
That is a really long question.
Oh, I liked that question.
I think it was cool, though.
It was great. No, I mean, yeah, I mean, what's interesting is, I guess one thing that certainly a lot of biopics do that just kind of by definition, I guess, that I was interested in was the sort of idea of like an origin story. The idea of kind of seeing how someone becomes someone. Certainly there's a whole tradition of that about kind of, Motorcycle Diaries is Che Guevara before he became Che Guevara, and Shakespeare in Love. It's these kind of becoming sort of narratives. That to me is really interesting because I think there's this big question mark of where do these quote unquote great artists come from? What's the actual process of becoming that? And the Charlie Parker story is referenced a lot in the movie, which Fletcher kind of, he twists the story a bit and uses it to kind of justify his methods. But it also, there's this question that's kind of underlying it, which is that we don't really know exactly how Charlie Parker went from, in his teens, being a kind of undistinguished sort of saxophone player who no one in Kansas City at the time thought, including the really kind of smart jazz people at the time, thought would gonna go anywhere special, to suddenly within a couple of years, literally, by the time he was 19, already being hailed as the greatest musician on the planet. I mean, it was just this kind of immediate sort of thing. So it poses all these kind of questions. It almost seems like, like a Faust story or something must have, it's like, or the Robert Johnson kind of myth as well, of that he sold his soul to the devil in order to be great at guitar, So there's that whole myth, and so I think less than sort of strict kind of looking at specific biopics, it was more that kind of idea of looking at the biographies of some of these musicians, and especially the kind of missing pieces early in their life, and trying to sort of fill in what might have been, that I was interested in. And then, yeah, I guess to the second part, I mean, it's certainly, well, we'll see. But I guess the one thing that I'm certainly very kind of grateful for is that, no matter what happens, that, a movie about a jazz drummer actually, can connect to people who maybe weren't in that world. It's such a specific, esoteric world in many ways, but my hope was always that that it could connect. And I think in large part, thanks to these two guys, they humanize it, and they also universalize it in a way that I think wasn't apparent on the page.
And how do you feel about Whiplash whipping up Oscar buzz?
There you go. You're not getting away with it.
How do you feel, Miles?
Good.
Okay, ladies, got the microphone right there, and then we'll go to the man.
Has this movie provided you with answers to how far you would ever push yourself or let other ones push you to get the best out of yourself, what your own boundaries are?
Or how far you might want to push someone else.
Well, that's part of the sort of central debate, that theme, and I think there's you don't achieve greatness without pushing, whether it's you pushing yourself or pushing others. Again, having said that, the methodology is possibly questionable. But yeah, I do like the whole scene in the jazz club. After my brilliant piano solo, where I discussed I just tossed that in there. Yeah.
It's like 4 bars.
No, it totally has to do with my point. Just hear me out.
Unbelievable.
Dude, I actually had to practice that. That's what's really sad, is that I don't do that well. So I did practice a lot.
Sausage fingers.
Don't let's get started on fingers, dude. Yes, practice is good.
Gentleman in the red hat.
Hi, first of all, thank you for an absolutely amazing movie. It definitely is Oscar worthy, no doubt about that. Just ask a couple of questions actually. One is the jazz scene as it is now, particularly on drummers. I remember there was a drumming record which was a total classic, which was Skin Deep, which was Lou Belson, and I think part 2 was totally drums. That's it. And this reminded me of that sort of thing, and I don't think, unless I'm correct, please correct me, if there are any drummers like that today. And secondly, I would like to ask both J.K. and also, if I may, Miles, about what inspires you both as actors. What inspires you? So, in other words, if you were a drummer, what would inspire you? But what would inspire you as actors? Thank you.
Just in terms of what's great about, and maybe part of the reason why the movie's about, at least nominally, about big band jazz, which really, even more so than you can kind of argue that jazz itself has been marginalized in the culture. Big band jazz is like non-existent in the culture now, and to a large extent. But it was the era when drummers were celebrities in a weird way. Louis Bellson was a showman. Gene Krupa, Joe Jones, Chick Webb, Buddy Rich. These people were, if not the most kind of spotlighted people of their group, certainly among them, of their various ensembles. So in a way, you're a side man, but you're also a front man. So I remember when I was kind of learning to be a drummer, there's something very romantic about that era, which I never lived through, but just kind of watching old footage of those guys and just the way they would the way they would make their drum sets, the gleaming sort of drum heads and the slanted snares and the way the initials would be written on these huge floor toms that are bigger than rock bands' floor toms, bass drums. So there was a whole romanticism to it that existed then that I don't think really exists anymore. But it's also something I think doesn't really exist in small combo jazz either. Obviously, many of the greatest drummers in jazz history were primarily small combo players, many of the most important ones. But this movie specifically about the big band world, which is just its own kind of, to me, its own kind of romantic sort of era.
An inspiration for you guys?
I was, rather than listening to Damien, trying to think of how to respond to that question, because I've never really thought of consciously being inspired by other actors. Certainly there are, many actors that I greatly admire, and I was just thinking of a couple of films, Anthony Hopkins in The Elephant Man, for one. For whatever reason, Willem Dafoe in Platoon jumped into my head. But I'm really inspired by, and this goes back to the beginning of my theater days, the beginning of my music days. I felt like when I was studying classical music in college, it was about, Brahms or Schubert or whoever I was singing, that I sort of feel like a conduit to great creative artists, whether they're composers or whether it's Shakespeare or Chazelle. It's really it's the creator that inspires me.
Miles, anyone?
Yeah, I don't know, for me, kind of when it clicked into something different than just kind of getting on stage in high school and making people laugh and just kind of the entertainment aspect of it. I really enjoyed it. I'd say something, people would clap, and that was exciting for me. But I think there was something about when I started taking classes in New York and kind of going to the Lee Strasberg Institute there, and you walk in and you're seeing, black and white photos of Pacino at that same school, and, De Niro and Brando and Hoffman and all these guys. And I think that's what's, to me inspiring. I just love the kind of the history of acting. And I think it is such a beautiful craft, and it is something that is, you absolutely get out of it kind of what you put into it. And so for me, I guess that's kind of what I'm inspired by is just trying to, to just kind of be a part of something that I have such a great respect for, and to not, disrespect it. I don't know. Get
Great.
inspired.
We've got time for 2 very quick questions, I'm afraid. Gentleman there, and then we'll come down to you there.
There's a scene towards the end of the movie, just after the amazing piano solo, where Fletcher.
Thank you.
Fletcher talks about that. There's that conversation, and Fletcher talks about his desire to see people that he's working with exceed his expectations. And I just wondered if anybody could point towards a time during the production when someone they were working with exceeded their expectations.
During the production of this film.
During the production of this film.
When I saw the movie, it exceeded my expectations for it. It's very rarely, at least from my experience, that the movie is better than the script. Usually the script is so good and you hope to make a version of it that kind of gives you that feeling you get when you first read it. And absolutely, when I saw this film for the first time, I was kind of blown away by what Damien had done with it. Because as an actor, for the final product, you really have little to do with it. I mean, at the end of the day, you film for a couple weeks and then people mess with it for a year, or in Damien's case, 2 months, and and they put it together, and your opinion means nothing. They're choosing what takes, and they're, picking what angles they're shooting it at. But just the way Damien shot it, and kind of the tension and suspense, all that stuff. As an actor, you can't act suspense. You don't act tension. That's all kind of done in the edit. So I was really, truly blown away by Damien's talent, and that's why I'm doing his next film.
And last question, gentleman here.
Miles, Damien said in an interview that your personality is much closer to your characters than we think. Do you agree with that?
Sorry, that might...
The character's more real to us?
Damien said in an interview, in an IndieWire interview, that your real personality is much closer to your characters than we think. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like... No, I mean, it's... I think that it's probably a side of me, that my buddies have never seen. Maybe, my girlfriend has kind of seen over this past year and a half, because she's seen how much I've wanted to, I've just wanted this. I've wanted to kind of work on these films, and she sees that kind of passion and drive for me. But most people, I've never really seen that kind of a side to me, and get an opportunity in a script like this to show and show how it connects to you, and really kind of wear your heart on your sleeve. So yeah, but no, I'm not. I mean, I go out with girls, I go to the gym and stuff.
You have friends?
Yeah, I hang out with my friends.
I'm going to finish, if that's okay, by...
What interview was that?
I'm going to finish by just asking about the quote, where no two words in the English language are more dangerous than good job. Did someone say that to you?
Me?
Yeah.
No. No, that was from my own sick mind. Yeah, I do remember when I was, I grew up mostly in the U.S., but partly in France. And I remember in France, they would joke to me about how, I guess in their mind, their vision of America was people saying good job all the time. They had this vision that I had never kind of thought about, and I guess it is true. But it seemed to me, again, like something that, I guess what's interesting to me about that scene is that there's many ways to take the Charlie Parker kind of myth, and some people pointed out, which is true, that even most versions of that myth don't even involve the actual, like, throwing the symbol at his head. It's actually just kind of putting it on the ground.
I wish my character knew that.
And that, that J.K., that Fletcher truly uses, twists this myth around to totally justify his own behavior, and the fact that he pulls from it this lesson that you just should never say good job. It's not a lesson I necessarily agree with, but at the same time, and as with any character you write, I guess, you want to be able to see their point of view, and as you know, screwed up as Fletcher's mindset is, the one thing I do think makes him somewhat noble is that you know, in a world of hypocrites, he has a coherent worldview. There's an integrity to his worldview. It might be a very perverted and despicable one, but it's one that he will go to his grave defending. He'll throw his career away in Carnegie Hall in order to defend this point of view. He literally cares nothing more than about finding this Charlie Parker. So his methods are horrible, but at least there's something to be said for that kind of that sort of blind passion.
Thank you for being here today. Thank you for sharing your story, and congratulations on an incredible film. And thank you
Thank
guys
you
for
so
being
much.
here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.